Have you ever wondered how one of the largest mass migrations in human history unfolded in the span of a single year? In 1971, that's precisely what happened in South Asia, setting in motion a series of events that led to the birth of a new nation, Bangladesh. After the colonial sun set on the British Empire, the Indian subcontinent was cleaved into two nations, India and Pakistan. Pakistan was a unique creation, a country with two wings separated by 1,000 miles of Indian territory. The eastern wing, known as East Pakistan, was home to the Bengali-speaking majority, while the western wing, West Pakistan, was dominated by Urdu-speaking Punjabis. The two wings of Pakistan were as different as night and day. The Bengalis of the East were proud of their rich cultural heritage, their language, and their traditions, all of which were starkly different from their Western counterparts. However, they found themselves marginalized, their voices drowned in the political and economic affairs of the country. The government, centered in West Pakistan, seemed to turn a blind eye to the East. Economic policies heavily favored the West, leaving the East languishing in poverty. Political power was concentrated in the hands of the West, and the Bengalis felt their representation was merely symbolic. The cultural and linguistic differences added fuel to the fire. The imposition of Urdu as the national language sparked widespread protests and resistance in East Pakistan, where Bengali was the mother tongue. The language movement of 1952 was a significant turning point, solidifying the identity of Bengalis and sowing the seeds of discontent. The tension simmered for 2 decades, with occasional flare-ups punctuating the uneasy calm. However, the situation reached a boiling point in 1970, when the Awami League, led by Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, won a landslide victory in the national elections, promising greater autonomy for East Pakistan. But the West Pakistani powers were not ready to relinquish control. And so, in the face of relentless oppression and the fight for self-determination, the stage was set for a war that would change the face of South Asia forever. As the year turned to 1971, a spark ignited the tinderbox that was East Pakistan. Tensions had been simmering for months, even years, but it was in the early hours of March 25th that the fuse was lit. This was the beginning of Operation Searchlight, a brutal military crackdown by the Pakistani army. Their aim? To suppress the Bengali nationalist movement, a movement fueled by linguistic, cultural, and political disparities that had been festering for decades. As night fell, the city of Dhaka was plunged into a terrifying darkness. The army began its assault, targeting universities, police stations, and the homes of political leaders. Innocent civilians bore the brunt of this assault, their lives forever marked by the horrors of that night. But amidst the chaos, a beacon of hope emerged. In the early hours of March 26th, a declaration was broadcasted from a clandestine radio station. The voice was that of Major Ziaur Rahman, who, on behalf of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, declared the independence of Bangladesh. That moment was pivotal. It set off a chain of events that would lead to a full-scale war. A war that wasn't just about territory or political control, but about the very identity of a people. The people of East Pakistan, now calling themselves Bangladeshis, were ready to fight for their language, their culture, and their right to self-determination. The war was brutal and bloody. It brought untold suffering to millions, but it also brought out the indomitable spirit of the Bangladeshi people. They banded together, men and women, young and old, to resist the oppressive forces. Their resilience and courage inspired others around the world and drew international attention to their plight. In the face of such brutal aggression, the people of East Pakistan had no choice but to take up arms and fight for their freedom, and so the war began. The war was not just a regional conflict, it soon escalated into an international humanitarian crisis. As the conflict intensified, a mass exodus of refugees flooded into neighboring India. It's estimated that close to 10 million people, most of them Bengalis seeking refuge from the escalating violence, crossed the border into India. This sudden influx of people put a tremendous strain on India's resources, and the plight of these refugees garnered international attention. Meanwhile, within the borders of East Pakistan, atrocities were being committed on a large scale. Reports of mass killings, rapes, and the destruction of villages began to circulate. These acts of violence, perpetrated largely against the Bengali population, led to a significant loss of life. The exact number of casualties remains a matter of debate, but it's widely accepted that hundreds of thousands, if not millions, lost their lives during this period. The international community was slow to react, But as the scale of the crisis became apparent, the world began to take notice. India played a pivotal role in this. Not only did it provide refuge for millions of people, but it also used its diplomatic channels to highlight the crisis. Indian Prime Minister Indira Gandhi traveled to several countries, rallying support for the cause of the Bengali people. The global media also played an instrumental role in bringing the crisis to light. Journalists from around the world risked their lives to report from the ground, their stories and images bringing the grim reality of the situation into living rooms across the globe. In the United Nations, the issue of East Pakistan was hotly debated. Despite opposition from certain quarters, notably China and the United States, who were wary of upsetting their ally Pakistan, the consensus was growing. The world could no longer ignore the plight of East Pakistan. The stage was set for an international intervention. As the war entered its final phase, the tide began to turn in favor of the freedom fighters. It is no secret that the involvement of the Indian military in December 1971 was a pivotal turning point in the war. India, having observed the conflict from its eastern border, decided to intervene, lending its significant military strength to aid the Bengali freedom fighters. A series of decisive battles ensued, each one tipping the scale further towards the cause of Bangladesh's independence. The Battle of Boira, fought over the skies of Bangladesh, gave the Indian Air Force a decisive victory, demoralizing the Pakistani forces and boosting the morale of the freedom fighters. Meanwhile, on the ground, the Battle of Hilli saw fierce fighting, but the determination of the freedom fighters, combined with the strategic prowess of the Indian forces, led to another crucial victory. However, the most significant clash was undoubtedly the Battle of Bazantar. This was a hard-fought conflict that saw both sides suffer heavy casualties. Yet, the combined forces of the Bengali freedom fighters and the Indian military managed to hold their ground, inflicting a severe blow to the Pakistani forces. As the battles raged on, international pressure on Pakistan mounted. Diplomatic isolation and the constant battlefield defeats made it increasingly clear that the end was nigh. The Pakistani forces, beleaguered and overwhelmed, began to see the writing on the wall. On December 16, 1971, after 9 months of intense fighting, the Pakistani forces surrendered. The instrument of surrender was signed at Ramna Racecourse in Dhaka, marking the end of the war. In the wake of the surrender, jubilant crowds filled the streets, their cries of joy echoing across the newly born nation. This was the day Bangladesh had fought so hard for, the day the tide turned and Bangladesh was born. In the aftermath of the war, a new nation emerged, scarred but resilient. Bangladesh, born amidst the chaos and bloodshed of 1971, faced an uphill battle from the start. The ravages of war had left its mark on the landscape and the psyche of the people. Infrastructure was in ruins, the economy was in shambles, and the political landscape was volatile. Yet, against all odds, the country began to rebuild. Justice, too, was a pressing concern. War criminals, those who had perpetrated horrific acts of violence during the conflict, had to be brought to account. Trials were held, both nationally and internationally, to ensure that the guilty were punished. This was a necessary step, not just for the sake of justice, but also for the healing and reconciliation of a nation torn asunder by war. However, the legacy of the 1971 war for Bangladesh extends far beyond its immediate aftermath. It fundamentally shaped the identity of the nation and its people. The spirit of defiance and resilience that spurred the fight for independence continues to inspire generations of Bangladeshis. The war has become a touchstone in the national consciousness, a reminder of the sacrifices made and the hardships endured in the quest for freedom. Moreover, the war had significant geopolitical implications. It altered the balance of power in South Asia and set in motion a series of events that continue to influence regional dynamics to this day. Bangladesh's emergence as an independent nation marked a turning point, not just for the people of Bangladesh, but for the entire region. The 1971 war for Bangladesh stands as a testament to the resilience of a people in their quest for freedom, a defining moment in South Asian history that continues to shape the region to this day.